All right, this weekend, as we celebrated the 245th birthday of America, we did so as a growing chorus of those on the left are, claiming that 1776 was a forged birth certificate for our nation, that America's founding was actually in 1619. And rather than a nation that saw all men endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, it was founded as a racist nation. So today, we take a look at two competing narratives in America. The New York Times, 1619. Now, frankly, that should be a disqualifier right there coming from the New York Times. But anyway, we're going to have the conversation. The New York Times 1619 Project and the former Trump administration's 1776 Commission, two competing narratives. Well, I'm with the latter, just so there's no mistake, but I think you need to know what's going on. And of course, I'm not going to do this by myself. I'm going to bring in experts to help us take a look at this. Dr. Ben Carson, former secretary of HUD, is going to be joining us, and Mike Gonzalez, senior fellow at Heritage Foundation. Both of them served on the 1776 Commission and continue to do that outstanding work. So we're going to talk with them here in just a moment. The website, TonyPerkins.com. If you're on the free speech platform of Gab, it's at Tony_Perkins. All right. And let me give you one more plug. All right. We just launched, and by the way, thanks so much to all of those who financially stood with us as we came up to the end of our fiscal year, June 30th. So the end of middle of last week. We are grateful for each and every partner who is standing with us so this program can continue all across America and literally now around the globe. So thanks so much for being a partner with FRC. One of our initiatives is our Worldview Center, our Center for Biblical Worldview. And if you would like to find out more about how you can look at these issues from a biblical perspective, here's what I want you to do. Text the word worldview, that's worldview, to 67742. That's 67742, okay? Now, if you want to find out more about the terms of our texting, go to frc.org/text for terms and conditions and our privacy policy. But text the word worldview to 67742, and you'll be able to be a part of getting this information on all of these issues from a biblical perspective. All right, many Americans seem to have a diametrically opposed versions of American history, increasingly. It used to be, it was very subtle that there was this rewrite of American history. One of the hobbies I have is I collect books, most of them in the late 1800s, prior to the 20th century, because that's when a real rewrite of American history. Most of the books I have are about history or government. And you saw a very subtle shift in this rewrite of history. Well, now it's not subtle. It's open, it's blatant, and we've seen it in this 1619 project in the New York Times. And fortunately, the Trump administration, the president got it. Some people went to him and said, look what's happening. And so he pushed back with the 1776 Commission, although shut down by Biden. It has gotten some traction. So here here to help me examine this and look a little deeper at what is really taking place in our culture in America, Mike Gonzalez, senior fellow, the Douglas and Sarah Allison Center for Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Mike, welcome to Washington Watch.
Tony, it's great seeing you again. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for taking time out of your holiday to be with us. Let's start with the 1619 project. Here's I thought I was celebrating the 1776 as the birth of the nation here for 245 years. I now found out we had it wrong. 1619, according to the New York Times.
Yeah, I think you put it exactly right. These are two diametrically opposed visions of the country. One, the 1776 view, which we're celebrating, celebrates America and what's best about it, celebrates our ideals. Ideals, by the way, that when we have aspired to live up to them, have solved all our problems. Ideals that have attracted about 150, I think 100 million immigrants, over 100 million immigrants since 1850, including myself. Ideals that have made this country a superpower and an inordinate experiment in liberty, prosperity, and human flourishing. The other view is hideous, is an America that is hideous. Everything about it is ugly, but especially its laws, its institutions, and the real target here, it's capitalist system. Capitalism is just a fancy word for the freedom to own things, the freedom to have individual private property. I own this, and I am able to sell it to you after you and I agree on a price. According to the Marxist view, and this is at bottom a Marxist undertaking, that creates slavery. The fact that we're able to individually own property, exchange it leads to capitalism, and capitalism inexorably leads to a lot of ills. So this is what is happening here. It's an attempt, and I published a book last year titled "The Plot to Change America." This is an attempt to change America, and they start at the very beginning by changing how we view it, because we conservatives understand what Edmund Burke said, that in order for a country to be loved, the country needs to be lovely. And the left wants to tear that down, and that is what 1619 is about, Tony.
Mike, as I made a reference to earlier, I mean, there have been those that have been working to revise history for a long time, but it's been subtle. This clearly is not subtle. In fact, the New York Times, the magazine, when this was rolled out in August of 2019, made very clearly, quote, aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the United States national narrative, end quote. So, I mean, it completely reframes our history. And there's no question that America is made up and has been successful because of contribution of a wide range of people, including African Americans, including Hispanics, including a whole host of people. That's who America is. I mean, we were a melting pot at one time. Now, instead of out of the many one, we're now trying to tear apart out of the one, create many. What has changed so that they can be so blatant in pushing this rewrite of history right in front of our faces, and they're not challenged?
Well, it began very subtly, as you said, with Howard Zinn in 1980, A People's History of the United States. He painted an America that, again, could do nothing right. Even the Civil War was something that had oppressed the working class Irishmen of New York, according to Howard Zinn. So, look, the reason for this is what we're debating at the moment here in the United States, critical race theory. It begins with critical theory. A bunch of Marxist scholars in Europe, in Germany, begin to ponder in the 1920s and 30s why communism at that point had not succeeded except in a backward part of Europe, Russia, why it had failed in Germany and Italy. And they thought that the reason for that was that the economic determinism of the Soviet Union, of Marxism so far, had been wrong, that the working class would rather work really hard, assiduously at changing its living status, at becoming the bourgeoisie, than at overthrowing the bourgeoisie. That with capitalism, it was really easy to change your station in life. So they worked, they came up with these ideas how to make Marxism cultural. They referred to the economic determinism as vulgar Marxism. Then they came to the United States. And here in the United States, after a stage of having critical legal theory in the 1970s and 80s, law professors of color who were Marxists created critical race theory, which makes everything about race, sees everything through the prism of race, divides us through identity politics into categories of the oppressed and the oppressor, and attempts to change America through such a paradigm. And that is why you need to once you create the categories of the oppressors, you need to indoctrinate the members of the categories of the oppressed categories, the members of the victimhood categories, with the idea that the country is evil, that they have grievances, and that they, rather than work to better their lot in life individually. They should work collectively through the categories to completely transform the country. This is exactly what is happening.
So when you look at this 1619 project, and then, critical race theory and how it's getting into, accelerating. It's working its way into our schools, our classrooms all across America, even in conservative areas. You're finding this in the classrooms, of course, being driven in large part by the National Association of Educators, or NAE, that is, they're pushing this, and I think they even come after Heritage for blowing the whistle on critical race theory.
Yeah, they just came out late last week saying they were going to take the fight to us. You know what? Sure. We're very happy, very proud of the work we're doing, making Americans, helping Americans understand critical race theory. But there's something here, Tony, that is happening. I've been crisscrossing the country lately. I was just in Denver. I was just in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I went to Loudoun County, Virginia. I went to Austin, Texas, just in the space of a month. And this is a grassroots opposition. The reason why, as you rightly said, this has exploded now. Critical race theory had remained dominant inside the campus for a couple of decades, nearly 3 decades. But even though it dominated inside the campus, especially in the area of civil rights, it had not been able to have much impact on public policy. It had begun a little bit over the last 4 or 5 years to enter the realm of K through 12 education, especially in places like New York. But it had not really taken over. Then we have 2020. We had the 1619 project in 2019. And then you have 2020 with the tragedy of George Floyd's death, and then the deft use of that video by Black Lives Matter, organizations that are led also by Marxists who want to change the country, and they completely transform the country. They have a great deal of impact. The media helps them a great deal.
But I want to go back just very quickly to the 1619 project. What was the biggest flaw when you look at the New York Times 1619 project and their understanding of America's founding?
Our biggest flaw? I thought that actually, I'm very proud of the work we did. And
no, I'm going to go back to the 1619 project, their flaw in the way they looked at America's founding.
Sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, no, they had several flaws. One, obviously, is placing the beginning of the country in 1619. They did this for a reason. They wanted to deceive. They wanted to say America is, has a bad birth certificate, that we begin with evil. America is not. America hasn't been perfect, but that is something that, in fact, they went back on. The New York Times then backed off from that claim. The other one was to say, and this was really a whopper, to say that the colonists had fought the revolution because they were afraid that Britain, the mother country, was going to do away with the institution of slavery. The problem with that is that they had no backup for that. The historians from all walks of life, from the right and the left, went after them and say, this is like the death of Jesus Christ. This is an event, the founding, that has been written about a lot. There's a lot of evidence about this. Show us any evidence in any sermon, in any writing, in any speech, in any document that this is the case. And they had, I think, an article written in a South Carolina newspaper, and a revisionist historian who had written about this. This was laughable. It was a howler. If it would be a howler had it not been so bad, such a libel that and this is the New York Times. We can't say enough bad things about this attempt. No country has done this to itself except for the communist tyrannies of Pol Pot, Fidel Castro, the Bolsheviks. They came along and tried to smear what had happened in the past because they wanted to implement a new blueprint. But no sane, healthy country has done this to itself. And Americans have to be very clear about this, that the people trying to do this to us, to smear our history, to smear our sense of who we are the equivalent, because they share the same ancestor of Pol Pot and Castro
Right.
and the Bolsheviks.
And those did not have good outcomes. And that's why
No.
we've got to step in. And of course, President Trump, former President Trump, did that by executive order, created the 1776 Commission, which I found very interesting, that one of the first things that Joe Biden did, one of the first things he did when he got into the Oval Office was to rescind that executive order.
It was the first thing he did.
Report. Okay, I knew it was at the top. It takes the report off the White House website, but the commission has continued to meet. You guys have continued to do the work. Tell folks what's going on.
We're sworn commissioners of the United States. We meet, we communicate with each other. We are going to be traveling. We are letting the American people know that our target is now CRT, critical race theory, which is, yes, an academic discipline, but also a call to action for revolution, a call to action to do exactly what you and I have been discussing here on this show. And the American people, by the way, one of the features of the American people that social scientists and foreign visitors have always noted is that Americans are exceptionally attached to liberty. Many people have actually found this to be a fault. Lewis Hart found it to be a fault. Herbert Marcuse, obviously a critical theorist, found it to be a fault. But whether you find it to be a fault or not, we are exceptionally attached to liberty. So the American people are looking at this because once it leaves the campus in 2020, after the BLM-induced mayhem in the country, and it begins to enter our schools, it begins to enter our military, the houses of God, it enters our workplaces, it attempts to take over everything. The American people say, no, what is this? This does not accord with my understanding of my country, of who we are, of who I am, of who my family is. We're good people. And as I say again, this needs to be emphasized, it is not healthy. It is not healthy societies that try to tell themselves we're bad and evil and need to change everything. Only tyrants do that.
Well, very quickly, Mike, before we run out of time, we've got about a minute left. How do parents in particular, I want to focus on the schools, give us the top 3 or 4 things that they need to be looking for, questions they need to be asking to uncover this CRT?
They need to, I've written about this, it's on heritage.org. They need to be looking at whether students are being taught that racism is not an individual act, an individual sin, that it's systemic and structural and institutional. That is critical race theory, that meritocracy is a myth. That is critical race theory, that what we need is equity, not equality. Equity is the opposite of equality in this corrupted CRT sense. Equity means that the government must treat us all unequally, whereas equality says, according to race, by the way, equality says the opposite. So anything that teaches equity over equality is CRT. And if the teacher or the principal or the school board member or HR says no, you can say no, that is not. It is.
Well, Mike, we're going to post your piece that you wrote for the Daily Signal on this. We're going to post this on the website, tonyperkins.com, so people can see it. We've got a lot of interest in parents across the country on this issue, and we want to get them prepared for when the kids go back to school. Mike Gonzalez, thanks so much for joining us. Great conversation. Look forward to having you back on again.